All right, everybody, welcome back to another recovery interview. This time I am joined by Malkie, and Malkie and I worked together for, it was only a month, and it was last year in 2024. She was diagnosed with slip discs, L4-L5 and L5-S1. I was L4-L5 and L5-S1 as well. And she endured about 8 months of really debilitating back pain. She was waking up every day and crying in pain. And within a month of working together, with her determination, the work that she put in, her back pain decreased significantly. And I got a note from her at the end of the year last year, talking about all the amazing things that she was able to do, hiking and playing tennis and just moving her body in ways pretty much every single day, in a freedom that for a while seemed unlikely. And so Malkie has graciously offered to be here and to share her story of recovery. So Malkie, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for asking me.
Yeah. So one thing that I like to start these interviews off with is just getting a sense of what was your life like and what were you like before this journey started? So take us into, a little bit about who you are and, what life was like before September 2023 when your pain started.
Yeah, well, we'll give it a go. So I'm not an athlete by any means, but I've always been a very active person. I think as an adult, as I've gotten older, physical movement has become particularly core to my overall whole body health, is kind of how I refer to it, mental health and physical health. But I am a knowledge worker, so kind of, sitting at my desk 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. My background is in startups, so working with early and growth stage companies for over a decade. I also was teaching at a university before I decided to go back to school. And actually some of that kind of coincided with the back pain, or the resolution of the back pain, kind of a life shift that I made a bit as well. But yeah, just sort of average. I live in New York City, and kind of, live close to parks and center that around my life as well. Green spaces, getting upstate to hike. But pretty typical, I would say.
Yeah. Typical, you're an active person. I know you mentioned, yoga, Pilates, like tennis. Even if I would question your idea of not being an athlete, because I kind of like to throw out that idea that people aren't athletes if they're
you do, which I appreciate.
Not competitive. Yeah. So
yeah, I would say running. I think I forgot to mention that has been a part of my life for a while as well. So that's probably the most consistent thing that I lost once the back pain started.
Yeah.
But not to get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Yes. So you have this active lifestyle, and you're a knowledge worker. You're working in front of a computer. I think many of us can relate to that. And then take us into what happened in September of 2023 when this back pain started.
Sure. Unfortunately, it's a very vivid memory. So I
often tends to be.
Can't forget those. So the summer prior, leading up to that September, I kind of ramped up. It was doing even more than normally, and I had started adding Pilates, the reformer, into my life. It was something I always was curious about. I don't know if you're familiar with the reformer, but I was very new to it. And I had found a studio nearby, and I wasn't sure when exactly the back pain, it definitely started to act up over the kind of weeks prior. But there was a particular day, it was a Tuesday, and I went to a class in the middle of the day. I took a break from work, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say. I was on the machine and could feel everything just tighten up in a way that didn't feel so normal. And I kind of pushed through the rest of the class, and the walk home was like the last walk that it was brutal. So yeah, just a I wish it were a more exciting story, but Pilates reformer kind of was the physical thing, if you will,
Mm.
to associate with that
Yeah.
occurrence. Yeah.
Okay. So you have this experience with the Pilates reformer, which I've never been on one of those machines, but I know I've seen them. And you're walking back. It sounds like you're hunched over, just in a lot of pain, and like, yeah,
Hobbling.
something's clearly wrong. And
Yeah.
then what starts to happen? I know about a month in, you got evaluated and you were diagnosed, but like, take us through like that initial month of what happened.
Yeah, the initial month was just trying to get some appointments, but I was that day onward, I kind of was just flat out. I wasn't able to, no position felt good. So it wasn't even like I was bedbound because that didn't feel any better than standing or sitting or walking or, and so, but the pain just started being very draining because it impacted my sleep and whatnot. But it took about a month, multiple appointments. Finally ended up going to a doctor who would actually like come in for a minute and like take me seriously. And they did the scans and were just like, yep, this injury happens. We see it. I don't think I had even talked about the machine that I had been on. But they immediately said, we won't even mention surgery, but we can give you the cortisol shots if if it doesn't recede. But they basically prescribed physical therapy. That was the initial reaction from them.
Okay. And being told that you have these slip discs, L4, L5, L5-S1. I'm curious, like for me, I got diagnosed with it was an annular fissure, ruptured L4, L5, and then a herniated L5-S1. So similar. And I remember afterward, like it brought in a lot of fear just to basic movement, and it kind of made things worse for a while. I'm curious, how did you react to that diagnosis, and what your prognosis was?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't recall the fear very like explicitly. Like that's not something that can remember naming. I think I was hoping that I almost knew that would be the diagnosis. So I did, just being an adult in the world who's aware of things.
Googling.
Yeah, right. And I was both relieved because I needed the prescription to start, like the therapist wouldn't see me without it. And anyone else who more on the massage therapy side of things wouldn't touch me because they were nervous without knowing what's up, which is great. They're doing their jobs right. I also couldn't, those are the kinds of things you don't really want to do without word of mouth recommendations. So it was kind of just sort of like I felt a little bit stuck. But once I got that prescription, I think it was a mixture of kind of cautious optimism that like, okay, there's something that we can kind of work with, but also just dread of like, I wish this could be resolved like overnight, like just a month in, and I was already, so done with the level of pain that was there.
Yeah. So, okay, you get this prescription for physical therapy, you have this diagnosis. How did things evolve from there to ultimately entering the mind-body neuroplastic world of healing? Because usually that doesn't happen unless you have a few failed treatments.
Yeah. So, 1 month goes by, and I was working first with a really expensive, I would say more a smaller private practice of physical therapy and chiropractic kind of center, and I had met them a couple years prior when I had a little flare up before I knew any of this, and that had resolved. And they were wonderful at that time. This time around, the practitioner that I was working with had suggested in a not so kind way that this pain was all in my head. And I think that had stuck with me at some point, but it also made me kind of put up guards and be like, oh, this is not a space that I can work in anymore, because she was no longer, it was not like it was not feeling mutually beneficial, if you will, and like safe as space to go for what for pain relief. She was essentially, it felt like she was making fun of me in many ways. And I was like, I'm not making this up. And also she was kind of like, why am I not seeing progress? And that was also kind of what was going on. Okay. So that led me to just a standard clinical practice, not clinical, the Sphere, which is like, I don't know if they're all over the country, but in New York City they are. It's just a franchised or multiple location place where it's like a bunch of beds, you're not getting any private treatment. And that was a great experience, but like 2 months go by, 3 months go by. It's December and I'm about to go on a flight to Cape Town, South Africa, which is a very long flight. And I had told him this, and we were working toward, sitting for longer, and nothing was working. And what I recall is that being in sessions felt great. So like the manipulation of my body and moving things felt good in the moment, but nothing held. There was no relief in any way beyond the 32 minutes or whatever that I was kind of in the room with them. I'll pause there, and I'm happy to continue, but I want to make sure I'm still answering your questions.
Yeah, no, you are. I think it's so interesting that you had that experience with the first physical therapist who's like, Malkie, it's all in your head, but sounds like in a way of protecting herself as opposed to, offering something, an alternative pathway. But I'm curious if that planted any seeds of like, oh, maybe like when you actually did come across the neuroplastic, the TMS work, if that kind of all made a full circle moment in a way.
I'm curious too. I feel like it must have in some way. I know that once I found the language and once I came across the mind body, kind of more of that material and those resources, I did reflect back. And I remember being like, I wonder if this is what she was trying to say. And just she didn't have a more empathetic way of framing it, or a more educated way of kind of going about it, because she was very much focused on it's your alignment of your body. Like she would measure and see like my hip was like one side was higher than the other, and here's what's going on. And so they're clearly, anyways, I definitely connected that dot back to that. But long story short, if I'm able to do that, January came, I went through that flight to Cape Town. I kept it because it was also a family obligation. It wasn't just like a leisure trip. It was a combo, but it wasn't something I could just kind of back out of. Or I chose to go. And I just remember it was back burning. Like you don't want to sit on a plane when you're not. Like it was pretty rough. The upside I will say is the water in the ocean in Cape Town is frigid. So it's a great way to numb yourself if you're me.
Give a burning back.
Yeah. But yeah, I came back in January and I was just like, New Year, this is crazy. Like it's been 4 or 5 months and I'm not sleeping. I'm not doing very much. And I did feel desperate. And I remember the first call with you, you were like, don't do this if it feels desperate. And I probably lied and was like, oh no, I'm here because I know it's going to work. I was at my last wit's end. There's no doubt there. But I had called up someone I know who, this is not a realm that has been entirely new to me. I just have been very resistant to it. And I called this person up and was like, I'm desperate. And he kind of like walked me through a bit of a meditation. And I'm not sure if I felt a shift. Maybe I felt something move, if not release or like feel better. It was something enough that like I was like, maybe there's something to this. It was just like he had 10 minutes. It was really just like a breathing meditation of like visualize your pain, and I either did or didn't feel something shift a little bit. And from there that led me to I don't remember the name of the group, but the folks in the UK. So yes, thank you. Yes. So he had previously worked with Georgie and had sent me her contact. And so I sent her a desperate note being like, help me. And she basically was like, I'm no longer practicing, but I coach others. And so I have a list of practitioners. So I started working with someone else off her website, who was a very kind human being, but also just something wasn't connecting. Like it wasn't, I wasn't getting anything out of it. And more importantly, the pain was still very, very present. I will say, I was still at this time, I had shifted from the physical therapy practice to a chiropractor and physical therapist. A small private practice, he does both. And that was a better experience, but it still was just like something was not, the results were not significant enough for where I should have been. At this point, I also started slowly like running-ish, even though I technically shouldn't have. They were like, you're not ready yet, but nothing felt good. So walking and running didn't feel worse than not. And so this is all kind of going on in the background. So to be fair to this person that I was working with, I hadn't been fully in the process of like removing the physical kind of pieces of it.
Right.
So after, go ahead.
I think that's so interesting too, because you had this person in your life who had their own recovery, if I'm not mistaken, using mind-body methods. And, it was similar to me. And I think a lot of clients, like my mom was the one who gave me Dr. Sarno's books. And I was like, this is BS for the first year and a half. And then it started to click. And I find it so interesting how, sometimes it takes working with a practitioner or a family member sharing with you, or a friend or whomever, and it still might not fully click until it does. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very gracious way of you to be like, I came in after I was like building on like I feel like it's almost a way of you being like, it wasn't all me, but
it definitely was not all me.
There was definitely a method in the way that you explained it that was it felt much more productive, or like it felt more contextual and much more helpful to understand what and why. But yeah, you're not wrong. I had started to read some books. Like I had started to do some of the resourcing in terms of reading the books, and at this point being like, I was less reactive of like, this is crazy, because again, I had been exposed to this when I was in like middle school, when my brother fell off a ladder and was flat out on his back because his spine, right? And so I always chalked it up to being like, that's insane. And also, look where we are today, because so little seeds definitely had been planted. It wasn't that foreign, but the fact that it kind of came back in a way where I would preface being like, so I can't believe like I'm doing this, and this is how I would start telling it to other people, which is interesting because the reactions there were much more like, oh no, this is like, that makes sense. And I was like, huh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So what was it about the explanation that you received from me, which I know you're a more sciencey, logical person. I know that might have been part of it. But like, what was it that finally allowed that information to kind of make it past these walls and really land?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you did a great job in really first of all, you heard where I was coming in from in terms of my biases, or like where I may have needed. And so for even the fact that I'm like a super data-driven kind of person, especially in this realm of alternative health stuff, I think that there tends to be an interesting space to play in. So I think there was a way that you presented, and you very much focused, I think, a lot on these books. There is data now, right? There was less data 20 years ago, for sure. But you kind of were speaking my language, and that definitely helped. I think there is also not to take away from the value of your work in any way, but it was just also a perfect storm of, to your point, I was ready to read the books. I was ready. Like
Yeah.
I needed something that would make a difference. And part of our work together was also you being like, okay, girl, slow down. Like, we
Yeah.
can't will it away. You can't read it away, right? Like,
Right.
take it in. And also the
Right.
process is just the process. And so chill.
Right. Well
Which
put.
was not an unimportant lesson in that whole thing too. Like that was a big piece of it.
Yeah. So let's go into that month of working together where,
Yeah.
I recall it wasn't, sunshine and daisies. Like there were some really challenging moments and, times when not a lot was happening. But like what started to emerge for you when you really got to this point of I'm I'm desperate, I'm ready, I'm doing the work.
Yeah. I probably could go back and between all the emails I sent you and the stuff I wrote down together, like a diary or a journal of like all the moments.
Yeah.
One of the biggest breakthroughs for me that I remember is I was taking a walk in the park, and the piano was still there, maybe a little less so, but it was still very present. And it was just this, it's going to sound strange. I remember my brain just sort of being very aware of it, like processing everything that we've been talking about over the last kind of 2 or 3 weeks. And I remember this was a few weeks in, and I was a little bit frustrated where I was like, where are the results? Like, why am I still in
Mm-hmm.
pain? And there was this moment that just clicked around the fear and like what we had been talking about, just stop being afraid of it and actually kind of just welcoming it in or making space for it. And somehow that kind of clicked. And I remember taking like the next step that I took, because part of my challenge wasn't all demonstrated earlier, but part of the thing was that it was the pain was coming in such a way that it was just running up and down my legs as well. So it's literally like back all the way down. So it was impacting everything. And I remember the next step that I took. So literally taking a step would fire up everything. So that's why like walking, like nothing felt good. But I took this step and I didn't feel anything. And it was just this small moment of painlessness, or we can call it relief. And there was something in that was just incredibly like freeing. It was just I got a little glimmer of what this is, or that something is working. And it almost didn't matter that the pain kind of came back. It wasn't perfect. That was definitely the start of a fairly quick, like full recovery over the next 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that moment because it highlights, the recovery in and of itself. All of it didn't happen in that moment, but that openness to seeing how it could happen did.
Yeah.
And I sometimes see with folks, like they can have those little moments, those glimmers, and then they might get frustrated. It's like, oh, well, it just came back, so what's the use? But I love how you use that moment to say, oh, no, this is evidence that things can shift and things can change and that this is actually working.
Absolutely. And of course there were still days where I was, frustrated and annoyed, but I put a lot into that, and it was a big one.
Yeah. And you also applied that, if I recall, to emotions as well. Like you mentioned kind of welcoming in the fear when you're walking. I think I remember a time during our sessions where you opened up to fear, just the feeling of fear, and you saw it decrease. And I remember your reaction was like, whoa, wait, it's decreasing. That's so cool.
Yeah.
And it was like this aha moment of actually opening up to something allows the energy to move through you.
Yeah, it is so cool. And when I realized how it's the exact same method or approach to managing anxiety. And thankfully, that's something that I can manage through. I would say it's a low level. It's something I can manage through lifestyle, breath work, things like this. But I'm a full grown adult, and I had only recently learned about that and how allowing that those feelings was really strong, sometimes really scary. emotions or just sensations in can actually help dissipate. And I experienced that. So again, I think I might have been a little more primed for this than your average person, but I also kind of want to be the person here to say, like, to anyone who's like not into this, like I was that person and would get it.
Yeah.
And also just being open to, but yeah, so having that awareness around the anxiety, I was like, oh, it's the same thing. But that has been a huge thing for me since, even of just around so many things in life, but like the fear of, fill in the blank. It's such a relief, but yes, that was a huge part of getting through. I think that was like a huge part of that breakthrough, like getting through over the last hump of like just the rest of it dissipating.
Yeah. I love what you said there of using these tools to apply to your daily life. I was just at the conference for the Association for the Treatment of Neuroplastic Symptoms, ATNS. I know it's a mouthful, but one of the presenters there, Christy Weepy, she's one of the key folks in developing pain reprocessing therapy, or PRT. And the whole idea is that, you're reattributing sensations or situations or emotions from dangerous to safe. And you're welcoming it, you're moving toward it. And granted, this is a concept that's been around for a long time, right? Buddha talked about similar stuff thousands of years ago. But her line, which stuck with me, was PRT is a one-trick pony. It's just a really good trick. And that technique that you talked about of opening to fear or to anxiety, when it comes to, it's not just about pain, it's not anxiety, but situations in your life. I think that showcases how the tools and the skills that you learn going through this process are things that you can take with you for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. I mean, I could not plus one that. could not emphasize that more. And it's something that like I want everyone I know and love to like understand, because there's so much, even just around the daily life stuff, like you said, not back pain, just things could be so much easier if they understood and could make this connection. That sounds a little condescending, but if they were aware of this and how but it's been huge in my life since then. I have there's no question.
Yeah. So take us through, you're at this point in the recovery where things are starting to click, you're seeing these glimmers. When did it really take off, and when did you really start to see results?
Yeah, so I remember I had a trip to Europe planned at the end of April, which was my birthday, which is why I remember this. And we finished.
You're going to work on a farm, right, for a little while?
I did.
Yeah.
I did do that. I was going to hike and work on a farm. And I remember you asking me, you're like, did you like just book this trip, or did you have it planned? And I'm not sure. I think I was honest with you. I was like, I was very optimistic when I booked my flight.
Yeah.
So no pressure, but I didn't tell you that. So I went and did that. It was significantly improved by the time, like already this was just probably 5 weeks after starting to work with you. Wasn't perfect, but I was literally in a field, crouching down, working in the dirt. I was hiking in Slovenia. Like it was active. This was not a this is not like a city kind of aesthetic trip. And it wasn't perfect, but it was definitely just like couldn't compare. I remember the flight was like a world of a difference from 5 months earlier, 6 months earlier in December going to Cape Town. But when I think it was when I got back from that trip, it just continued to like accelerate in terms of movement. I was back doing my regular kind of movement routine in early May when I returned. So like, or mid-May, whenever I was away only for 2 weeks. So I would say mid-May was kind of like the major turning point. And truly the rest of the summer, I had a summer, it was going to the beach without concern about sitting, or, taking a drive without concern about sitting, or, I actually don't have any memories of any anecdotes after May, probably for that reason.
Because because it just felt so normal.
Yeah, I was back to myself, and it was kind of like this. It seemed overnight enough that like I truly like my roommates would be like, "Hey, remember when like last week you couldn't do exercising?" I was like, kind of just became this joke. But yeah,
It's incredible. And the story that you were sharing before we hit the record button was of your friend like scaffolding this mountain, doing this 10-mile hike. Share that, because I think it really sums everything up.
yeah, it's a great. It was also just a very profound like full circle in a way, but also just like end of year moment. But it was Thanksgiving last year, so this was however many months that is after April. 6 months later, I suppose. And yeah, it was a scramble. So if anyone knows Breakneck Ridge in upstate New York, lower upstate New York, Hudson Valley. And so it's like a 2-mile scramble. And then we ended up continuing on for a 10-mile hike, which was unplanned, but worked out great. And as we're scrambling, my friend looked back and was just like, she was kind of like, how appropriate is it? Like it was the morning after Thanksgiving. And she was just like, so much to be thankful for. And I was like, wow, truly. So it was a very cool moment of just, I literally could not even think of doing that a few months prior. And I wasn't even thinking twice about it. And that was wild to me. So
cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
Pretty cool.
So you got to this place by the end of the year, and you sent me this note saying, I'm able to hike and play tennis and yoga and run and Pilates and all these things. And I'm curious, one of the things, for people who are listening, like if they're struggling with back pain or they're struggling with their own neuroplastic symptoms, one of the things that can be hard to understand is like exactly how to heal. So if somebody asked you like, all right, how is it that you actually got better, Malkie? Like, what would you say was the secret to your healing?
I think the first thing would be openness. Truly, just being open to learning, and maybe unlearning some of the narrative that exists in the world around these approaches. I think that's a real thing, and we were remiss not to comment on, because I know it was a piece of my skepticism early on, when I was a kid, when I was older. Openness, but also just that space to, like, the space and grace of take it in and be open to it, and like it will come. I think you do have to be open to it, right? Because if you're just being like, this is stupid,
right,
that's the kind way of saying it. If you're going to resist it along the way, I think, and that was one of the first things you told me, and I was like, that's really hard, right? Like I remember you said, now I'm going to challenge you to cancel the rest of those appointments. Like we're done with the physical healing piece of it. And I was like, well, that's insane. But then when I thought about it, and if I go back to data, I was like, well, it's not like that's giving me good data. And so, or good results rather. So not to make it all about the data, but I think it just, I'm just repeating myself there, but just being open to something new that is also just like an investment in like truly like whole self sort of thing. I wish I could be a little more concrete. I'm kind of just like tell people to like email me. I'll tell them why they should work with you. No, it was literally life changing because I got my life back. So is that helpful?
Very helpful.
Okay.
In terms of, you said it's life changing.
Yeah.
What about it has changed that you wouldn't have experienced had you not gone on this journey? Like, how is the way that you view your body or pain or yourself evolved just as a result of going through the messiness of pain and emerging on the other side?
Yeah, I think the dropping the fear around health or my body in general was a really, really big one.
Mm,
I am, um, let's just say it this way, I could be hyper vigilant about how I feel physically, and that's due to an autoimmune thing and just other things that have a presence in my life,
mhm,
health wise. Um, and I had it almost felt like I had trained myself or fallen into a trap of sorts of constantly just hyper aware of like, how am I feeling? And like, what's going on? Like checking in, but in a way that didn't feel good. It felt annoying. And
mm,
these weren't, I would say, they weren't intrusive thoughts, but it was waking up in the morning and doing like a body scan and just being like, do I feel dizzy? Do I feel sore? Like, what's happening? And a big shift after doing this work for the back was that all dropped away.
mm,
Like I have not, I can't tell you the last time that I started my day checking in that way with my
mm.
body. Meaning I have other practices like,
Right.
breathing, meditation, etc. Not every day, but a couple times a week. And when I need to, I'll add it in more because that is important to check in. But the in the way in which it felt a little bit more maybe unhealthy, that has really rolled off. And it just around my health in general,
Mm,
this fear of it's like, even if I feel like a cold coming on or a flu, and it's like, cool. And if I get sick, I get sick, as opposed to
mm.
like, oh my God, I don't know, whatever's going to
Right.
impact, whether it's like being prepared or like not. It's just like, it either will happen or it won't, and you'll be okay around germs, like these little micro things that weren't
Mhm.
so much. I realized they actually had taken up a lot more mental space than I'd given it credit for. I noticed once it dropped away, like that's when I noticed how much space it had taken up. So
Mm,
I mean it when I say like this was really, really a really big impact in these other ways.
yeah. I love what you basically said is that it wasn't just about back pain, it was about health anxiety in general and how you've been
Turns out,
able to, yeah, didn't know it at the time, but here you are. And how you've been able to essentially just move through life in a more um, less fearful way as a result of doing this.
I would say that's a really nice way to sum it up. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
nice. So you're in this place where you've made this recovery, you have these insights. Um, as we near the end of this interview, is there anything else that you want to share with people who are listening to this? Is there anything else from your experience that really feels alive and wants to be conveyed?
I think maybe the only thing I'll share is that this is what, a year and a half later,
Hmm.
and recently back has like flared up again a little bit, and I'm sharing that because it's everything we've been talking about. Like that's okay. There's something up, and I'm
Hmm.
fairly sure I know what it is. But even if I don't, I think a lot of what I learned working with you is like we don't have to actually get to the bottom of it. It's more of just understanding that shit's going on, and a lot
Hmm.
of stuff there. And again, reminding myself in terms of like the fear, having less of that fear around it. It's just not that big a deal. And I have a lot more trust in my body, but not just that, it's the resources. I think what this has given me a lot of, it's been very empowering because it's been very resourcing in that it's something I can continue to go back to. So just
Nice.
adding that, healing once doesn't mean you're never going to feel it again. And also, it's such a different experience when it happens again because it's not something I even need to talk about. I'm mentioning it here because other people, I want them to
Yeah.
know. But yeah,
I'm so glad you mentioned that too. And something I actually didn't share with you is for the second time in 14 years, my back pain flared up last week. And I totally know, it was kind of the sign of like, okay, Alec, the way in which you've been doing things and kind of pushing, you need to to change that. And sure enough, a few days later, it's fine. But it's I think it just goes to show that these symptoms, when you're on the other side, like they become a barometer, right? And it becomes like a sixth sense, something that you can see as helpful, and seeing where you're holding yourself back or where you're pushing yourself too hard or whatever. And it's kind of like a guardrail that allows you to move back into alignment. So you're certainly not alone in, having symptoms that come up from time to time. What I say is the goal is not pain-free forever. The goal is chronic pain-free. And that I think is possible.
And to your point about it being a barometer, like that's incredible. We have a way to signal to us that, what something's going on and something is not feeling right or good. And that's what's amazing. So I know now I'm gushing, so I'll stop talking, but work with Alec. He's the best.
Well, it's helpful when you have an amazing client and one who's who's open-minded, who came from a skeptical place, but was on this journey and was still open to things nonetheless. And I'm just delighted that here we are, a year and like 6 months ish later, and you're back to life and
pretty cool.
Thriving. So
yeah. Thank you for having me back here to share. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing it. And if anybody wants to hear more about Malkie's story, we'll put some information in the comments section of the video. Yeah, you can delve more into her story. And thanks for listening, everybody. Malkie, thanks for being here, sharing. And we'll see you next time for another recovery story. Take care, everybody.